Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. I didn't cry when they fired me. I didn't scream, beg, or throw a chair like they probably expected. I just looked down at the termination letter in my hands, felt the weight of 24 years on construction sites hit my chest like a wrecking ball, and quietly placed my hard hat on Trent Holloway's desk. Then I walked out. My name's Micheal Foster. 47 years old. Lead safety officer and foreman for Halston Buildworks' largest project in the state, until 5 minutes ago. I wasn't fired for stealing. I wasn't fired for being incompetent. I was fired for doing my job. For keeping men alive. Trent didn't even try to hide it. We don't need whistleblowers slowing down our deadlines, he said, not bothering to look up from his monitor. The guy had been on site for all of 6 weeks and already acted like he owned the place. I had spent more years on job sites than he'd spent being legally allowed to drink. I could have made a scene. God knows I wanted to. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid of confrontation, hell no, but because I knew guys like him feed off it. They use it to justify what they do. Paint you as unstable, difficult, bitter. So, I walked out silently, past the welders laying pipe near open live wires, past a guy jackhammering without ear protection, past scaffolding with no toe boards. I walked away, but not for good. Because something inside me snapped that day. Something permanent. And the man who fired me. He has no idea that he just started a war. Trent Holloway was everything I'd spent my life fighting against. Slick. Political. All surface, no spine. Halston brought him in from corporate to streamline the North Ridge commercial project, a $20 million deadline-driven beast. And by streamline, they meant cut corners until somebody lost a hand, or worse. The day after he arrived, he shook my hand and said, "Micheal, you're the guy who cleaned up our safety stats last year. Real stickler for the rules, huh?" I smiled politely. But my gut already didn't like him. The second week, it started. "Do we really need to log every single inspection daily?" he'd ask, sipping $7 coffee. "Can't we just file one big report at the end of the week? Or, we're falling behind on framing. Can we get the electrician started early, even if the area isn't cleared yet?" Each time I told him no. Each time he'd nod and smile and say, just asking, like it wasn't a big deal. But I knew it was. The final straw came on a Tuesday morning. I was early, as usual, checking the scaffolding installation on the south wall. And there they were, 3 guys working 20 feet up with no guardrails, no harnesses, no fall nets. Nothing. I shut it down on the spot. Told them to get down, now, before someone died. That's when Trent stormed out of the trailer, all red in the face, clipboard in hand. "What the hell are you doing, Micheal? Why isn't this section being framed?" "No fall protection," I said calmly, bolting a temporary rail in place. "They're getting geared up." "We're already behind," he snapped. "The site tours tomorrow. If the client sees that we're not framed out, they'll see workers who are alive," I said flatly. He got in my face then, voice dropping low. "You think this is your project? It's not. You're not in charge. You're just the dinosaur with a clipboard slowing everything down." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. He saw it in my eyes, that I wasn't backing down. That afternoon, I filed a full report with our internal safety division. I attached photos. Emails. Daily logs. Everything. By the next morning, I was called into the office and fired. Just like that. No review. No HR. No defense. Just a man with something to hide trying to shut up the one person who could expose it. As I packed my locker, I stared at the photos taped inside the door, my son Mason in his cap and gown, my daughter Chelsea dancing with me at her wedding. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was focused. Because what Trent didn't know, was that I'd been documenting everything. Every violation. Every command to, just skip it. Every time he told someone to, make it look safe for the camera. And I still had one last move. That night, after telling my wife Elaine everything, I picked up the phone. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the voice on the other end answered. My name is Micheal Foster, I said, gripping the receiver tight. I need to report multiple willful safety violations at a major construction site. And I have proof. After I made the call to OSHA, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Paula Henderson, the federal investigator assigned to my case, met me the very next morning at a diner off I-90. No small talk. No nonsense. Just a tape recorder between us, a legal pad in her lap, and a look in her eyes that said, I've seen this before. I believe you. I handed her a flash drive packed with dated photos, time-stamped emails, audio recordings, safety reports, everything I'd collected. She scrolled through some of the files right there at the table. This is thorough, she said. If half of this checks out, your company's got serious problems. I know, I said. And they're not just violating safety rules. They're covering it up. She nodded slowly. We'll conduct a surprise inspection. Soon. They won't see it coming. For the first time since I got fired, I thought, maybe this will be enough. Maybe justice is finally coming. But I underestimated just how far they were willing to go to bury the truth. Underscore 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 underscore. Later that day, I got a call from Keith, one of the electricians I used to supervise. His voice was low, urgent. Trent just called an emergency meeting, he said. Told everyone you got fired for falsifying timesheets. Said there's going to be a federal audit and anyone who talks to you could be dragged into it. I felt the air leave my lungs. What? He's making it sound like you're the problem. Like you're the reason OSHA's sniffing around. Micheal, he's telling the guys you were stealing money. I was speechless. Keith continued, they made everyone sign updated NDAs. Real strict ones. HR's involved now. They're locking it all down. Just like that, the walls started closing in. Trent wasn't just brushing me off anymore. He was trying to erase me. To make me out as the villain. I called Paula that night to report the retaliation and the false accusations. She was calm, but I could hear the tension behind her words. This changes things, she said. They're obstructing an active investigation. We'll expedite the inspection. But an hour later, she called back again, this time her voice was tight with frustration. Bad news. Someone from Halston's legal department filed a complaint that you illegally took proprietary documents. They're claiming all your files were confidential, and you breached protocol by removing them. What? That's not how whistleblower protection works. I know, she said. But they're leveraging it to stall the inspection. It's a legal tactic. Bureaucratic quicksand. They're muddying the waters. So what happens now? We fight it. But it's going to take time. And the longer we wait, the more they'll clean up the site and destroy evidence. I hung up and stared at the wall. It was like trying to stop a landslide with my bare hands. The next morning, I got another text, this time from Luis, a quiet guy on the framing crew who rarely said more than a sentence at a time. They're painting safety lines. Fixing scaffolding. New harnesses showed up overnight. Thought you should know. It hit me like a punch. They were erasing the crime scene before the cops could arrive. Whitewashing every violation I'd documented. Fixing it all after firing me for trying to fix it before someone got hurt. But what made my stomach twist wasn't the cover-up. It was the realization that none of this was about one site. None of this was just Trent. I met with some of the old crew at a diner the following morning, guys I trusted. Keith. Luis. Caleb. They looked tired. Worried. But loyal. They're going scorched earth on this, Keith said. Trent's not just protecting himself. I think he's got help. Luis slid his phone across the table. It showed an email snapped on someone's laptop. The subject line made my blood run cold. Lewis Ridge Project, Schedule Recovery Plan. The body was short. Cold. Corporate. Board has approved revised completion strategy. Safety compliance should appear complete in all documentation regardless of on-site conditions. Rollout company-wide if successful. The sender? Jeffrey Vaughn. CEO of Halston Build Works. There it was. Not just negligence. A plan. Top down. Calculated. Profitable. My hands started to shake. They're trying this model here first, Keith said. Rush the job. Skip the safety. Fudge the numbers. If it works, they'll use it everywhere. Luis added, and Trent? He's their hatchet man. He's done this before. Where? I asked. Seattle, Caleb said. Last year. There was a fall. Foreman got blamed. Couldn't get work after that. I wrote it down. I needed to find that foreman. Because this wasn't about getting my job back anymore. This was about exposing everything. But before I could act, the next blow landed. Elaine came home, pale and shaken, waving a letter. A cease and desist. From Halston's lawyers. Accusing me of theft, slander, defamation, and malicious interference with company operations. They were threatening to sue me for damages. If I didn't return all company property, meaning the evidence I collected, and agree to stop communicating with current employees, they'd pursue immediate legal action. I stared at the letter, my pulse pounding in my ears. They were trying to ruin me. Bankrupt me. Isolate me. Paint me as a disgruntled liar who got caught stealing time. And worst of all, it was working. My reputation in the industry was tanking. Calls I'd made to old contacts went unreturned. LinkedIn connections disappeared overnight. No new job offers. Not even interviews. In a matter of days, I went from respected foreman to radioactive. That night, I sat in my garage, surrounded by the tools I'd spent a lifetime collecting. Wrenches, harnesses, high-vis vests, old steel-toe boots. The smell of rust and oil and honest work. I looked down at my phone. No messages. No calls. Just silence. Trent and his cronies had nearly erased me. And I realized something terrifying. If I didn't stop them soon, someone was going to die. They thought they could erase me. But they didn't understand one thing: I built my career on grit and stubbornness. I didn't give up when the paychecks were thin. I didn't give up after my dad died from a job site fall that should have been prevented. And I sure as hell wasn't giving up now. Because the more they tried to bury the truth, the more I realized it wasn't just about me. This was a system. A machine. One built to silence men like me and sacrifice workers like pawns. And I was about to take a sledgehammer to it. It started with the Seattle site. Caleb had mentioned it, a project from the year before. Same company. Same safety issues. Different foreman. Same outcome: someone fell. Someone got hurt. Someone got blamed. Then disappeared. I made a few calls to old industry contacts. Most were too scared to talk. But finally, a retired superintendent gave me a name, Derek Hansen. He used to be one of the best. Ran big jobs. Sharp as hell. Until last year, when everything crashed. He's in Boise now, the guy told me. Works as a laborer on highway crews. Won't talk to anyone about what happened. Halston nuked him. That was all I needed. I got in my truck and drove 6 hours straight to a rundown truck stop on the edge of Boise, where Derek agreed to meet me, grudgingly. When he walked in, I barely recognized him from his old LinkedIn profile. He looked like a man who'd been through war and came back with nothing but ghosts. We sat in a booth over black coffee and burnt eggs. Let me guess, he said bitterly. Trent Holloway. I nodded. He sighed. Same playbook. Different city. He told me everything. How Trent showed up late in the Seattle project. How safety inspections got faked. How protocols were ignored. How Derek reported it, and how suddenly, the blame for everything landed on his desk. A worker named Jack Tremaine fell from faulty scaffolding. The official report. Foreman failed to enforce equipment checks. But Derek had never signed off on that scaffold. They forged my signature, he said, voice tight with anger. I tried to fight it. Went to OSHA. Went to the union. They dragged it out until I couldn't afford a lawyer. And by then, no one would hire me. Did you keep records? I asked. He looked at me carefully. Then nodded. Back at his place, a modest rental out near the fields, he pulled a battered laptop from a closet. It took a minute to boot, but eventually, he opened a folder labeled, Insurance. Inside were documents. Photos. Email threads. And something else. A scanned copy of the forged inspection signature. And the original, unsigned version. You see that date, he said. They backdated it. Made it look like I signed off on the scaffolding hours before it collapsed. I stared at the screen. This is criminal, I whispered. He nodded slowly. I know. I just didn't think anyone would ever care again. Well, I said, I care. And it's not just your project. I've got records from Lewis Ridge that show the exact same patterns. Exact same safety logs. Same phrases. Same style of falsification. I pulled out my own laptop, set it beside his. We started comparing data. And what we found was undeniable. Every single safety report had the same language. The same formatting. The same digital signature. From different foremen. Over different projects. Across different states. And at the center of it all. Trent. He wasn't acting alone. This wasn't an outlier. It was company policy. Someone higher up was orchestrating it all. Using Trent like a hired hitman to take out safety oversight and silence whistleblowers. And it worked, until now. I've got more, Derek said. 3 emails from internal corporate staff referring to schedule over safety, in reference to Seattle. They called it adaptive policy. My stomach turned. They're sanitizing the language. Makes it sound clean. Justified. He nodded. Exactly. But the pattern is there. You just have to follow the money. Every time safety corners were cut, they beat deadlines. Which triggered bonus payouts. I blinked. So the faster the job finishes, no matter how dangerous, the more corporate profits. And the more Trent gets paid. He opened one more file, a PDF labeled Quarterly Incentive Disbursement, Internal Only. Trent's name was there. Bonus, $95,000. 3 weeks after Jack Tremaine's fall. I sat back in my seat, stunned. They're incentivizing this, I said. They've created a reward system for endangering lives. And the paper trail's been buried under fake logs and manipulated compliance reports. Derek looked at me. So now what? I looked at him squarely. We go bigger. I'm done with OSHA. They're slow, underfunded, and too easy to pressure. This isn't just safety violations. This is willful fraud. Systemic abuse. That makes it federal. He raised an eyebrow. You want to go to the Department of Labor? He asked. No, I said. I want the feds. DOJ. Inspector General. Criminal investigators. You think they'll listen? If we walk in with evidence from multiple job sites, across state lines, showing deliberate endangerment, forged reports, and retaliation against whistleblowers? They won't have a choice. We worked all night. Merged our records. Flagged overlapping names. Noted down dates, payout patterns, and bonus reports tied to unsafe completions. And then I started contacting others. I found a former Halston project lead in Arizona, blacklisted after filing a complaint. Another from Dallas, same story. By the end of the week, I had 4 other former foremen willing to submit testimony and documents. Derek agreed to go on record. So did I. And together, we prepared a master file that would send shivers up the spine of anyone still pretending this wasn't a criminal operation. The last thing I did before heading to the Department of Labor. I called Keith. Told you I wasn't done, I said. You coming back? He asked. No, I said. But I'm about to make sure no one has to live what we went through ever again. I used to think revenge was about getting even. Making the people who wronged you suffer as much as you did. But this? This wasn't just personal anymore. This was a crusade. Because if I didn't bring these people down, if I let them keep cutting corners and burying bodies under paperwork, more workers, good men with families, were going to pay the price. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Not on my watch. Derek and I stood outside the Department of Labor's regional office in Spokane, each holding a flash drive, a thick binder, and 5 signed affidavits from other former foremen who had been blacklisted, threatened, and thrown away by Halston Buildworks. The receptionist buzzed us in. By 10 a.m., we were sitting in a sterile conference room under fluorescent lights, facing 3 government officials from the Office of Inspector General, the branch that investigates criminal violations related to labor law. One of them, a woman named Agent Marissa Clark, flipped through our binder, page by page, without looking up. When she finally did, her face was unreadable. You're alleging that a publicly contracted construction firm has been systematically falsifying safety documentation across multiple states. Yes, I said. And that employees who raised concerns were fired, discredited, or blacklisted. Yes. And that senior executives created a bonus structure tied to schedule completion regardless of actual compliance with federal safety law. I nodded. She leaned back slowly in her chair. That would be considered willful endangerment, document fraud, conspiracy to defraud the government, and potentially criminal obstruction. Then she opened the flash drive. And everything changed. For the next 3 hours, we walked them through the entire scheme, site by site, step by step. Fake safety reports signed under duress. Scaffolding collapses that were blamed on human error. A growing pattern of retaliation against anyone who dared speak up. A company-wide email approving adaptive compliance strategies to hit impossible deadlines. Each time we showed them something new, I saw their pens slow. Their posture stiffen. This wasn't a couple of rogue managers anymore. This was organized fraud. Who is Trent Holloway, in your view? Agent Clark asked. He's the enforcer, I said. The cleanup crew. He shows up when they need results and doesn't care who gets hurt delivering them. And the CEO? She asked. Jeffrey Vaughn. I held up one final document, a quarterly report showing Vaughn's signature approving the exact email chain that encouraged falsifying site conditions to maintain performance bonuses. He signs off on everything, I said. He's not just aware. He's authorizing it. Agent Clark closed the binder, stood, and said 3 words. You've done enough. Within 48 hours, we were on a secure call with federal agents from both the Department of Labor and the DOJ Criminal Division. They didn't want to just fine the company. They wanted to take it down. We've seen scams like this before, one of them said. Usually in mining or agriculture. But this level of documentation? With whistleblower testimony, cross-site evidence, and falsified logs? He paused. If we build this right, it won't just be a fine. It'll be federal indictments. I didn't even realize I was gripping the edge of the table until Derek nudged my elbow. This was real. They were going to raid the site. Back in Spokane, I reconnected with Keith and Luis in secret. We met in a parking lot behind a hardware store at midnight like we were plotting a heist. Because, in a way, we were. A sting is coming, I told them. It's federal. Quiet. You won't know until they roll up. I need your help to make sure the truth is visible before they walk on site. Keith blinked. Visible how? They've cleaned up the site. Covered their tracks. I need you to make sure that just before the raid, the truth is on full display. Luis frowned. You want us to break the safety stuff? No, I said quickly. But don't fix what you know is still broken. Let them see what we've all been fighting against. They exchanged glances, then nodded. And one more thing, I said. When they arrive, you tell the truth. Everything. No fear. Luis grinned. About time someone burned that house of cards to the ground. Meanwhile, Derek and I compiled a blow-by-blow guide for the agents, every falsified log, every unsafe scaffold still up, every electrical panel that hadn't been fixed despite saying it had. I annotated it with photos, GPS coordinates, crew names, anything to cross-reference what the site log said versus what we knew was still happening. I also provided a key witness list, men who tried to speak up before but were silenced. OSHA complaints that vanished. HR letters that went unanswered. We handed the federal team a complete map of the fraud. And then, we waited. On the morning of the raid, I parked across the street from the Lewis Ridge site, same place I had worked every day for 5 years. Only this time, I wasn't clocking in. I was watching the walls come down. At 7:42 a.m. sharp, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows rolled onto the gravel. They wore windbreakers with big yellow letters across their backs. DOI. DOJ. OSHA. I could see Trent through my binoculars, clipboard in hand, giving the daily morning speech. Then he saw them. He froze mid-sentence. And I watched the color drain from his face. Federal agents swept the site like wildfire. Photos. Interviews. Measurements. Safety checks. Keith pointed straight to the northwest scaffolding where the rails were still missing. Louise showed them the ungrounded electrical panels. Caleb walked them through falsified toolbox meetings that never happened. 2 agents went into the site trailer and emerged with stacks of printed documents. Another went straight to the digital log server. The whole place shut down in under 30 minutes. At 9:17 a.m., I watched Trent get escorted to a waiting SUV, not in handcuffs, not yet, but sweating like a man who just saw everything unravel. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I just sat in my truck, still and quiet, staring through the windshield. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. You'd think the hard part was over once the feds showed up. But when you go to war with power, you learn real quick, it doesn't die easy. It digs in. It strikes back. And sometimes, it fights dirty. After the raid, I expected things to move fast. Instead, the investigation entered a brutal, grinding phase, what the agents called evidence integrity and cross-site verification. In plain English, that meant matching every document from every job site with the real-world conditions that existed when they were filed. And that meant weeks, months, of interviews, depositions, forensics. They weren't just looking to prove one crime. They were building a case so airtight that Halston's legal team wouldn't be able to wiggle through a single crack. And I was right in the middle of it. Every few days, I'd get a call from the Department of Labor or the DOJ. Michael, can you confirm this timestamp? Michael, does this signature look forged? Michael, what's the standard requirement for scaffold height fall protection on a 3-story commercial frame? I answered every question. Gave every detail. Built timelines. Matched GPS tags to site photos. I wasn't just a whistleblower anymore. I was the cornerstone of the case. And every time I looked at the faces of the investigators across from me, I could see it. They were furious. Not just at the safety violations, but at how deep the rot went. Then the subpoenas started flying. Emails. Internal memos. Bonus structures. Contracts with falsified compliance clauses. Within 2 weeks, the feds had seized 5 company servers, 8 years of project documentation, and personal devices from 3 senior executives, including Trent Holloway and CEO Jeffrey Vaughn. At the same time, OSHA launched a civil investigation while the DOJ pursued criminal charges. That's when the press got wind of it. I'll never forget the first headline I saw. Federal agents raid construction giant in safety fraud probe, whistleblower speaks out. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee going cold, as Elaine read the article over my shoulder. There it was. My name. My words. My story, published for the whole world to see. It felt surreal. Like standing at your own funeral and realizing people finally understand who you were. But Halston wasn't done. Not by a long shot. They couldn't stop the investigation, so they tried to poison the well. First came the online smear campaign. Fake comments on news articles calling me a disgruntled employee, accusing me of having a vendetta because I wasn't promoted. Then a leaked, internal memo sent to construction industry blogs that claimed I'd been fired for misconduct and that allegations were being exaggerated by a bitter former employee. And then they filed a lawsuit against me. Defamation. Breach of contract. Theft of intellectual property. They were trying to bury me in court costs. Bleed me dry. Break me emotionally, financially, whatever it took to discredit me before the indictments landed. I showed the lawsuit to Agent Clark during our next meeting. She didn't even blink. "This is good," she said. Good. It shows they're scared. They wouldn't waste the money if they weren't panicking. Can they win? I asked. She looked me dead in the eye. Not if we do our job. And we will. 2 days later, I got a call from a reporter with the Seattle Tribune. "I've been following your case. Would you be willing to go on the record?" I hesitated. Up to that point, I'd stayed mostly anonymous in the media. But now, Halston was using my silence to write their version of the story. It was time to speak. And so, I did. The interview ran 2 days later. Front page. Full spread. He tried to save lives. They tried to ruin his. It had everything: my background, the death of my father due to lax site safety, my entire career fighting for the men who trusted me to get them home safe. Photos of the unsafe scaffolding, the forged logs, quotes from Derek, even testimony from Keith and Luis. But the part that hit hardest? The photo of Jack Tremaine, the man who fell in Seattle, sitting in a wheelchair beside his daughter at her high school graduation. He couldn't stand. Could barely hold the diploma she handed him. And the caption read, "He was supposed to walk her down the aisle someday." The public outcry was immediate. Social media exploded. Construction unions issued statements. Industry watchdog groups called for Halston's federal funding to be suspended pending the criminal case. Investors started pulling out. Stock prices fell. And then, finally, the dominoes began to fall. Trent Holloway was indicted on 5 counts of willful endangerment and 2 counts of conspiracy to falsify federal safety reports. But he wasn't the end. Because the evidence he tried so hard to hide, it led directly up the ladder. CEO Jeffrey Vaughn. COO Marcus Bell. Director of Field Compliance. 3 regional project managers. All indicted. And all facing up to 5 years in federal prison. But there was one more twist coming, one final, dirty play that nearly crushed me. A week before the formal charges were unsealed, I got a visit. 2 men in black suits, claiming to be from the state licensing board. Said they needed to ask me a few questions about my professional credentials. Felt off. Real off. I asked to see ID. They showed it. But something about it wasn't right. I excused myself, went inside, and called Agent Clark. When I described them, her voice turned sharp. Do not go back out there. Lock the door. 10 minutes later, a real federal agent was at my door. The 2 men were gone. They weren't from the licensing board. They were private investigators, hired by Halston's legal team to dig up dirt or fabricate something damaging before the indictments dropped. They were still trying to silence me. Even now. But it was too late. The evidence was locked in. The feds were closing in. And Halston? They were running out of places to hide. I was naive to think they'd go down without a fight. I thought the indictments would be the end of it, that once the feds made their move, the rest would fall like bricks. But power doesn't fall easily. It morphs. It adapts. It plays dirty. And just when I thought we were finally closing in on real justice, the whole thing almost fell apart. It started with a leak. One of the DOJ agents, someone inside the investigation team, passed classified documents to Halston's legal defense. A court filing. A timeline. Even witness statements. I got the call from Agent Clark while I was having dinner with Elaine. Michael, we've had a breach, she said. What kind of breach? Someone inside the investigation team shared sealed evidence with Halston's attorneys. Enough to let them preemptively attack witness credibility and prepare counter-evidence. My stomach dropped. They know the feds are coming, I whispered. She didn't answer right away. Then, and they know what's coming. Which means they'll do anything to discredit it. The very next day, it began. A story hit a second-rate industry blog. A so-called source close to the investigation claimed I was coaching witnesses. Fabricating logs. That I had a personal vendetta against Trent Holloway because he allegedly reported me years ago for misconduct. It was complete garbage. But once it's out there, it sticks. Suddenly the press wasn't just praising the whistleblower, they were questioning me. I saw the shift happen in real time. People who had once called me a hero were now posting things like, if it's all real, why isn't he suing for wrongful termination? Sounds like he just couldn't cut it anymore. Bet he's angling for a book deal. That last one made me laugh, bitterly. I'd spent the last 6 months bleeding my reputation dry just to protect people's lives. Now they were calling me greedy. And then, the unthinkable. Derek Hansen flipped. The man who had sat beside me in that conference room, who had handed over every file, signed every affidavit, changed his statement. He claimed he couldn't verify the authenticity of certain documents. That his memory was hazy on exact timelines. He wasn't recanting everything. But just enough to raise doubt. Enough to cast a shadow. I confronted him. Met him in person, face to face. He looked hollow. Guilty. They threatened me, Michael, he said, eyes darting like a hunted man. Not just me. My wife. My kids. They said they'd ruin us financially. Take our house. Sue us for defamation. Said the case would never stick and I'd be left holding the bag. You knew the risks. I didn't know they'd dig up my mortgage records, he snapped. I didn't know they'd offer my wife a job in exchange for my cooperation. It's not just a lawsuit. It's pressure. Every day. Emails. Calls. Private investigators parked outside. I felt sick. They're not just covering up anymore, I said. They're dismantling the truth piece by piece. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry, he whispered. I don't need sorry, I said, standing. I need the truth. If you can't give me that, get out of the way. For 2 days, I didn't sleep. The feds were shaken. The DOJ delayed the next round of charges pending a re-interview of all whistleblowers. One false step, and the whole case could be dismissed on the grounds of tainted testimony. And I was back to square one. Until I got an email. From someone I hadn't heard from in years. Erica Kincaid. She used to work in Halston's compliance division. Quiet. Smart. Kept to herself. I remembered she always had a binder in hand and a Bluetooth earpiece glued to her ear. We'd barely talked back then. The subject line was just one word, enough. I met her at a public park just outside the city. She looked around nervously, holding a brown envelope close to her chest. I don't have long, she said. I'm under an NDA, and my name's still on the payroll. Why are you here? Because I've been watching. Reading everything. And I can't stand it anymore. She handed me the envelope. Inside were printed emails, internal compliance audits, and 2 things that made my blood run cold. 1. A company-wide memo instructing regional managers to destroy original safety inspection logs and replace them with sanitized PDFs. 2. A digital access log showing exactly who edited the documents, and when. One of the names. Jeffrey Vaughn. CEO. The timestamp. 2 hours after OSHA notified Halston of the surprise inspection. That's obstruction of justice, I said. She nodded. And falsification of federal safety records. I called Agent Clark that night. Told her what I had. She was silent for a full 10 seconds. Then, this changes everything. The feds reconvened immediately. This time, they added new charges. Obstruction. Destruction of evidence. Witness tampering. Corporate conspiracy. It was no longer just a safety violation investigation, it had escalated into a full-blown federal criminal case with jail time attached. They re-interviewed Derek. Re-examined every affidavit. Sent forensic teams to recover the original, deleted safety logs from backup drives Erica had quietly saved before leaving the company. And finally, they were ready. The indictments were reinstated, this time airtight. The DOJ held a press conference. They named names. They showed evidence. They played audio clips of executives discussing how to reframe fall injuries as training incidents. The media swallowed it whole. Halston Buildworks collapsed in less than a week. Stocks plummeted. Government contracts suspended. Executives arrested. And the smear campaign against me? Gone. Scrubbed. Replaced by stories like whistleblower credibility restored after explosive new evidence. Construction execs face 20-year sentences in record safety fraud case. I didn't win because I was the loudest. I won because I never stopped digging. And when the truth finally came to light, it hit like a wrecking ball. Justice doesn't feel the way I thought it would. It's not loud. It's not triumphant. It doesn't come with confetti or cameras. It's quiet. It's a sigh of relief after holding your breath for too long. It's the moment you stop looking over your shoulder. The second your heart stops bracing for the next punch. It's peace. But it's not without scars. 3 months after the DOJ's final indictments, I stood in a federal courtroom and watched Jeffrey Vaughn, Trent Holloway, and 5 other Halston executives stand before a judge as the charges were read aloud. Conspiracy to falsify federal safety records. Retaliation against whistleblowers. Obstruction of justice. Willful endangerment of workers. Destruction of evidence. They pled not guilty, of course. Didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. Dozens of former employees came forward. Backup servers revealed years of manipulation. Secret audits surfaced. Even Erica Kincaid's documents were corroborated by timestamps, emails, and internal memos they didn't know she'd saved. Their defense unraveled in front of the world. By the end of the trial, 3 were sentenced to federal prison. Vaughn got 6 years. Trent. 5, with a $750,000 fine. Halston Buildworks was banned from bidding on government contracts for a decade and dissolved within weeks. And the man who once told me, "We don't need whistleblowers." Yeah, he left the courtroom in handcuffs. But there were moments that meant more than any verdict. Like the day Jack Tremaine, the man who fell in Seattle and was paralyzed, called me personally. "I watched every news report," he said. "I thought I'd never see the people responsible held accountable. You didn't just get justice for you. You got it for me. For all of us." He paused. "My daughter says thank you. She says maybe now I'll be able to smile when she walks down the aisle." That broke me. I cried for the first time in a long time. Not because I was sad. Because something I thought was broken in me, finally started to heal. A few weeks later, I got an offer. A major national development firm, Zentran Global, asked me to become their director of construction safety. Nationwide oversight. Total authority to approve or shut down any site not meeting compliance. And a simple message from their CEO. "We saw what you did when no one believed you. We want that fire here." I accepted. Not because I needed the title. But because it meant that now I could protect lives before they were in danger. On my first day at Zentran, I walked the perimeter of a new job site just breaking ground downtown. Hard hats. Guardrails. Full harnesses. Safety officers briefing crews before lift work began. Everything by the book. As I stood there watching a crane operator secure his load with absolute precision, a thought crossed my mind. This is what it's supposed to be. Not perfection. But integrity. Derek Hansen got his name cleared, too. A judge formally exonerated him. He settled his wrongful termination suit for a 7-figure payout. He used part of it to start a nonprofit that advocates for construction whistleblowers. He calls it, the ground level. Says it's where truth always starts. Luis and Keith now lead safety for 2 regional sites under my supervision. They're thriving. And Caleb? The youngest guy on my old crew. He just passed his OSHA certification with honors. Sometimes I still drive past the Lewis Ridge site. They shut it down permanently. Turns out the structure had too many faults, from rushed work, cheap materials, and shortcuts that never should have happened. The city condemned it. They're planning to build a memorial there instead, dedicated to workplace safety and the men who paid the price for other people's greed. My name's not on it. It doesn't need to be. Because my legacy isn't a plaque. It's the father who makes it home to see his kid graduate. It's the worker who doesn't fall because someone finally checked the harness. It's the silence on the job site at the end of the day, not from tragedy, but from peace. I used to think standing up cost me everything. Now I know the truth. It gave me everything that matters. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.